Ryan, thanks so much for doing this. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks
Cheers.
for having me on.
No worries at all. So you're a personal trainer, certified health coach, and you're in the final year of your nutritional therapist training. You're the man behind the hugely popular Live Vitae. Am I saying that right?
It's the same thing. Live Vitae, Live Vitae.
Live Vitae Instagram account, which now has more than 380,000 followers. I guess for people who are watching who are not so familiar with your story and how you kind of got involved in this space, could you give us just a bit of a quick background about how you got to the point of what you're doing today?
So it started probably when I had a eating disorder and I had a, I don't know what you call it, an exercise addiction perhaps. And I was just overtraining, underfueling, eating the wrong sort of fuel for my body at that specific time. And then I got down a slippery track of looking at the weight of the scale, got in bad habits, got very isolated, and then I just had a big blow up basically in terms of family, my relationship with a girl at that time, and everything got brought to my attention. And then I found a personal trainer at my local gym, and he sort of educated, put me under his wing and showed me a few things, and he put me on my track basically. And then from there I obviously progressed, put on some body weight, started having a passion about health and how to empower myself with the choices I'll make daily, and that led me on to want to be a personal trainer, a nutritionist. But in between that time, I also was working for my dad in his antique business, and it's an old shop and it had some mould. So I was working in a mouldy building, and mould does wreak some havoc on your body. And then on top of that, I was eating a lot of bluefin tuna as well, and that's heavy. That's really heavy in mercury. So that added on to the mold problem, which I didn't know about at the time. And then I was going around this big circle of what is it, food intolerances, sensitivities. I felt drugged at the time and my head was all over the place. And then I think I was on a Chris Kresser blog post and he linked it together with Mercury. And then I sort of was going down the whole Mercury route. And then my body couldn't really handle the chelation of Mercury. And then I met a friend from another friend, and he put me onto a practitioner, and then mold was identified, and we started working on the mold. And then all of the process is basically aiding my knowledge and wisdom, and actually having personal experience and passion as well to actually understand things, what's going on. And then that's all been overcome to a certain extent, and obviously you're never perfect, so I'm constantly working on things for myself, and that's where I am now.
Nice. And you mentioned obviously mold and mercury there. Do you think that there are a lot of people that are living with kind of mild symptoms of mercury or toxic mold and not kind of aware of it?
I would say yes. I'd say I think about 30% of new buildings, well, this is in America, will have some mold issues, and that's new buildings as well. It's fairly common. Even a pillow could just be have mold in it, or dust. You could just, even on the underground as well, especially in London, you can just smell it, damp. Like London is the perfect condition for mold to grow in. Like we're always indoors as well, so that's another factor to consider. So mold is an indoor sort of pollutant.
Sure, yeah. And taking a look at your Instagram, which has obviously grown massively recently, one thing I noticed is that it seems more about the food and your hacks rather than anything to do with yourself personally. As in, you're sharing like cool meals and stuff and meal prep and things like that, rather than focusing on your own kind of personal stuff.
Yeah.
Could you explain why that is?
That's a very good question. I'm a little bit different to your typical influencer as such. I don't need to put pictures of me working out or me on like a beach somewhere or just living my life to a certain extent. I prefer to like put out like meaningful content or something educational, whether it be about food or lifestyle or something along the lines like that. And the same thing with ads and partnerships. I tend not to do them. I have a few affiliations, but I'm just not a fan of. I don't need the sort of confidence boost to do it.
Cool, no, that's awesome. And you obviously, one of the things you do share on there every now and then is some of the latest biohacks that you've been testing out on daily habits that you practice. One of them you're practicing right now by wearing the blue blocking glasses. Could you give us like a few of your favorite biohacks that you do or use every day?
I think a good one is actually sweating. So any form of sweating is going to greatly increase your ability to detoxify, cardiovascular health as well, lower risk of mortality. Like just that could be from exercising, could be from sauna, whatever you want. So just sweating daily, some form of sweating, and that's not even really like a biohack or anything like that. It's just common sense. So all my hacks are basically like really common sense, basic. Nothing geared towards supplements to a certain extent, because that's very personalized as well within the whole context of things. Another one would be looking at glasses, looking at your lights, your environment. So we'll be indoors right now. So obviously the light spectrum is completely changed and distorted. So so basically, if you have to think about it, every time you're indoors, the light frequency is changed and the blue light is actually more apparent. So blue light will represent midday light. So obviously, yes, it is midday now, but there's no red, there's no orange. It's very distorted. So that's a key thing, especially at night as well. So just wearing some glasses, just being careful of my skin as well at night. And just I'm a big fan of cold therapy as well. I like doing cold baths or cold showers or anything along the lines like that.
Cool, yeah. One of the things that I'm really fascinated about light and how important it is for health. And one of the things that you think about when you look at the sun is that sunlight's constantly changing throughout the day. And so I guess our bodies are finely tuned to pick up the subtle differences that are happening. Yeah. Whereas if you're indoors under artificial light, and maybe even like filtered light through glass, as you say, is not quite as good, then you're kind of, I guess, not frying your body clock, but like you're confusing your body clock, because it's harder for us to know what time it is, our bodies to know what time it is. So could you just explain some of the science behind that?
So like all the light goes into your skin as well, and through your eyes. Through your eyes it goes into the retina. From the retina it goes back into your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is in the hypothalamus, and then that will show the frequency, what time of day it is, and that will go with the temperature as well of the day. The wind as well is another factor that can play, and then your body picks up these sensory mechanisms, and then that will get translated, sent out into your peripheral tissues, and it have its own sort of clock sensor in your cell as well, and that will dictate sort of the function of the cell, the mitochondria, the redox, basically the redox states of reduction and oxidation. So it has a big influence.
And so do you do anything else in your own home, like at night, to block out blue light, apart from wearing the glasses? So
I wouldn't really have any light on. Right. So I'd be having like either salt lamps or just candles, just even taping and putting over some red film over some lights, like the oven hob, the oven hood light, and also in the fridge as well. Just putting a red cover over the top of the lights, and that's it. Just being in darkness, really. Minimalizing electronics at night for sure. Everything on iFlux or night tone, and just trying to like wind down, read books, and just chill at night.
Sure. One of the things I've been doing for the last month pretty much is just, as soon as I wake up, going outdoors for 15 minutes and just trying to get some natural light, and it really has made a crazy difference to energy levels. Sometimes I walk out there completely, groggy from having been asleep, and then I walk back and it's like having a couple of coffees, like you feel really energized. Do you do that? Do you go outside in the morning?
So I live in a block, so I can't really access the garden straight away. Ideally, I'd love to go outside barefoot, sun or light, whatever, and just be there. But I usually go on my balcony, get some light, then follow that up with some red light therapy as well, like a photobiomodulation device, which mimics basically sunrise and sunset, so the red frequency of light.
Very cool. And you mentioned barefoot there. Can you talk about grounding a bit? And because I know it's something that you're quite big on.
I wear some earth runners as well, some sandals,
very cool,
which have a sort of a grounding device attached to them, a copper coil,
Very
and then that's wrapped around the, I don't know what you say, wrapped around in stainless steel around lace.
Sure.
So it's all about being connected to the floor, to the ground. There's a negative charge. So basically you're charging to like the opposites. And when you think about it, your shoes that you wear are completely non-conductive to the floor. So you're disconnected, especially when we're in a high rise or something above the ground as well, further disconnected. So there's some grounding studies that say reduces blood pressure, cortisol, improves sleep, increasing immune cells, white blood cells, all of these things just from being outdoors. Then throwing on grounding on top of that, being barefooted outdoors as well is just a huge bonus. So I think it's just, we just forget about these things. We're not taught these things. Like wearing shoes is common nowadays. Does that mean it's not like it's normal nowadays? We need to question these things. Being indoors, we need to question these things. We are not indoor creatures to a certain extent, maybe in a cave or in the woods as such, but in our shelters, but not like we are now.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that we were talking about before we started recording as well is how I feel like we do forget these things, that for pretty much all of human history, we were outside, either, in the shade or, maybe in a cave, like you say, but generally we're outside most of the day. And so we were awake when the sun was up and probably asleep while it was down. But it seems like we've created this world which is kind of disconnected from what we evolved to work with. So why do you think that is?
I just think there's a huge communication gap. And just the way the rise of technology is, and how our focus goes towards technology and our dopamine neurotransmitters involved in the reward center of having things now as a society, and that goes back to food as well, just to appreciate things more. And I don't know, I think it comes back to questioning things. Like when you're in school, you don't question things. Like you're not taught the basics, things about about our bodies as such, or even how to breathe properly and making sure it's focused from the nose instead of from the mouth. Like that is a game changer. But you could go throughout your whole life being a mouth breather without realizing, and you can have all these health issues and no one would pinpoint it on that because you're not taught about that. Like even my parents, they've never ever said anything towards about how to walk, how to breathe. You just see things, like your parents should be an example, and that. But there's a gap in the knowledge, and that would be like when you see things in tribes in Africa or in the hunter-gatherers. Everything's very community based, and they get taught how to hunt, and I think society has just sort of changed that, and the way we live, and everything's fast paced.
Yeah, it's not a relaxing world that you live in if you live in a major city, that's for sure. And you mentioned their cold water exposure and using cold water as a kind of a biohack. What could you speak about some of the science behind that as well? So
depends how deep you want to go.
All the way.
So of course so psychological aspects are it's going to disturb your comfort zone, so it's going to push you out of your comfort zone. You don't have to jump straight into ice water as well. You don't need to do that. You can just do face dunks in a sink, start there, and then just build up your tolerance to that, do longer, and then move on to cold showers, and then move on to cold baths, and then move on to like ice baths and really cold and increase your time. And then go with yourself as well. Like, it is pushing the body. It's like a mild form of exercise. Well, that's what it is. It's a hormetic stress to the body. And just be mindful of like your stress levels, your heart rate as well, because it can increase your heart rate. So it increases dopamine, several neurotransmitters. It can increase your production of UVB, so increase your vitamin D production as well. So cold and sun used together increases your immune cells. It's very anti-inflammatory as well. It sort of shrinks your, so it increases your mitochondria efficiency basically. So what I mean by that, it will shrink your respiratory proteins. So you have 5 complexes in your mitochondria. So that will shrink it, so it'll be more efficient at burning and creating ATP. It will structure your water. So a thing called easy water in your cells. And that will increase your, well, there's a theory behind that. Water is the major driving force of energy in the body. So that will increase your negative charge of the water. So water's a battery. What else? So there's actually a detoxifier as well. There's a huge increase in your cardiovascular health from constricting. And then nitric oxide as well, another vasodilator as well after coming out of the cold bath. So you get a big rush of blood coming to the surfaces. And that's why it's linked up to the UVB and having sunshine as well, because that will increase blood to connect with the sun. So your blood is basically a chromophore. So the sun will sort of, how to say it? It produces some neurotransmitters, some hormones as well. So when we talk about melatonin, dopamine, serotonin, all these kind of things.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I've done it a few times myself. Gone through like cold lake exposures in January and stuff up in Hampstead, and it definitely, I mean, obviously it energizes you. You leave, but you do feel that something has changed in you. You know, once you feel really like buzzing for the rest of the day.
Yeah, well, that you get a huge hit of adrenaline. Mm-hmm. So I think your dopamine. Well, it goes back to dopamine. I think your dopamine increased around 250%. So also you'll increase your glutathione levels as well, and another antioxidant called uric acid. So you'll see them drop from the cold exposure, and then they'll come back up again. So basically, like we said at the beginning, it's a hormetic stress. So it's just like exercising, creating damage, and then ideally your body's capable of mopping that up again. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to your redox potential. And then that's where we are.
Very cool.
So how cold did you get in? You were doing January?
So I actually went with a friend on New Year's Day.
Okay.
You know, so we just decided to start the year that way, and it was pretty cold. I think it was 4 degrees.
That's cold, yeah.
So it was cold. We didn't stay in for more than a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, then we've been going like weekly, really, pretty much for the whole year, and it's been awesome to. Yeah. It's obviously much more comfortable this time of year, but it's starting to dip now.
Now I think it's at 18 or something like that. It's very much like. For me, I don't feel any benefit going in.
No, in fact, the only reason I go now is, I guess, for the grounding benefit.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's
well, when it's this temperature as well, there's a bit of a smell to the ponds.
It's not.
It's very murky.
Yeah, it's not as crisp and clean as it is in January. That's for sure. So obviously, you're big on nutrition and diet, and you know that's what your page is focused on Instagram. For someone who is kind of looking to, I know everyone's in a different situation, but for someone who is looking to kind of improve their diet, I guess, and improve their nutrition, have you got any kind of simple tips or hacks that they could do to kind of step their game up?
Yeah, what do you reckon my first answer is going to be?
I mean, that's why I'm asking you. I'm not sure.
Well, it's going to go back to eating like real food. So
yes.
What I mean by that is like unadulterated food. So minimally processed, single ingredient foods, the most nutrient dense food you can get, and not going back into the wild. Think about the food chain. A tiger will be like hunting and it'll go straight to the organs because that's the most nutrient dense foods, not a chicken breast, for example. So that's where I'd be going for. So eating seasonal vegetables and fruit, eating animal meat, fish, not being scared of fats, and then just going with the whole carb debate. It's all about just listening to the photosynthesis, because that's the number one source. Well, that's the top of the food chain. So like eating high carbohydrate meals in winter doesn't really make sense from an evolutionary perspective.
Yeah, in fact, I heard someone blew my mind with that the other day, and it's such common sense that we, in the fitness industry, I guess, and health and fitness, it's all focused on, cut for the summer, bulk during winter.
Yeah.
Whereas if you think about it in nature, if you live in the northern hemisphere, it's the opposite, because there's not enough sunlight to grow food in the winter.
Well, that goes back. It's like the belief. That's the belief system. It's like you should be beach ready, bikini body in the summer. Well, actually, like in nature, with leanness in the winter, we're coming out of hibernation.
Mm-hmm.
Yet in hibernation, wintertime, we wouldn't be exercising at all. Yet we'll be our leanness. So that's sort of removing that concept of like you have to like train to be like lean and shredded. Like it's just questioning the modern way of living. So in the summer we'll be eating more because there'll be more foods available. So that's when we'll overeat, and we're sort of getting to a state of producing excess body fat. And then what would that do is actually increase the synthesis of vitamin D in our skin as well. And then that will tie us over in the winter time. So we'll be actually losing body fat in the winter, and vitamin D stores will be used in the winter for that purpose.
Cool,
and it all ties into the whole melatonin thing as well. Our melatonin levels will be lower in summertime because of the sun exposure and the daytime.
Less, right?
Yeah, we'll be sleeping less, and in the winter, that's when our melatonin will be rising because it'll be colder and darker. And these things also affect our oxygen levels of our body as well. So the more colder we are, the more oxygen there will be in our blood and plasma.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And what do you do with your water? Because I know that I interviewed Tim Gray recently, and he said basically stay away from tap water, ideally get a good filter and then remineralize it somehow. What do you do?
I use a Berkey filter at home.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd say it's very good. I also someone gave me some silver coins to put in there, so I put a few silver coins in there as well. To remineralize, I don't focus too much on the drops. I just try to eat as nutrient dense as possible. Mm-hmm. Salt my food in Celtic sea salt, and then I just do that. I try not to go too complicated and start thinking about remineralizing it, cortexing it, so it has a charge to it as well. Although yes, it's important to a certain extent, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole of focusing on one thing and just get neurotic to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. So it's just having an understanding for it, do my best I can, and then just like letting it go and moving on.
Yeah, how important is that as well? Because that's one of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes in this biohacking health space, it's kind of quite easy to kind of realize how screwed up so many things are, and then kind of like just panic about everything and get caught up in everything, and like it all gets a bit much. Yeah. You can get kind of neurotic.
It can, like you can get ill from trying to be healthy.
Yeah.
Like it's so common, and like you just go down these rabbit holes of the whole biohacking community. I mean, this diet that for a certain time, it goes more extreme. It's like you really need to step back. And that goes back to the brain as well. The brain governs everything. So that's dealing with like things like stress, trauma, relationships, family, friends, like sorting that side out of things first. Really get your brain switched on, and then that will get your central nervous system back on, and you can actually feel these things and take control of your health more instead of a place of like fear and I've got to do this. And that would be going like you could easily just have this supplement. Oh, like, listen to that podcast and he said take this, and do that. And it's the same thing with me. Like I just said something about blue blocking glasses, is that you don't need to do that first. You can actually just reduce your light in the evening, then think about having some blue blocking glasses. So it's like really go back to basics. So yeah, it's so easy to go down that whole thing. And it's the same thing in like not biohacking, but even bodybuilding, for example. Look at pre-workout, intra-workout, post-workout. Let's get some bands in the training. Let's do some like like just do a crazy workout. Let's train 6 days a week. Let's try and do more and more. When much we should actually say, let's try and do less. Let's reserve our energy. Let's get back.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's good advice, solid advice.
And it'll be interesting because obviously at the Health Optimization Summit, we'll see all these, and you'll see all these companies trying to sell you something. So you've really got to be the governor of your body. You're the CEO of your body, and like you've got to take control and say, I don't need that. Is that really going to add value into my life?
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Let's quickly talk about EMFs and 5G. Is this something you're worried about, like the introduction of 5G in London? Are you doing things in your home to kind of try and mitigate the risks?
So this is another one. Like, we don't really know. Like, you don't really know what's going to happen. So I'm not feared of it. My ultimate goal for myself is to move out of the city anyway, to move out of London and to be more in a rural environment, away from the population, but still being with a community. So I'm not scared of it. I'm mindful of it. What I do to omit it is I do my best in watching my phone, make sure it's on airplane mode all the time. Well, when I'm not using it. Turning my Wi-Fi router off at night, or if I'm at home and using my Wi-Fi, making sure that I use an internet cable as well. But like we're in an office building right now, and there's so many signals coming through and going through us. It's like you really got to let go of that whole side of things as well, to a certain extent. But there'll be a lot of people with sensitivities, so it'll be very hard. But for most people, and it goes back to the redox state, which probably Matt from your previous podcast talked about. How healthy are you? Are you connected to the environment, like water magnetism? If those three things are dialed in, you're going to have a better ability of your body to repel these sort of things. And that goes back to the whole thing about mould, bacteria, mercury, all these sort of pollutants and environmental toxins. It all goes back to your cell redox. Is your body optimal and healthy to repel all these things and bounce back? So that goes back to your charge, your negative charge of your body.
Yeah, I guess the healthier you are, the more you're going to be able to deal with these toxins coming from everywhere. Cool. So I've just to start wrapping things up. One question I've been asking everyone I've been interviewing is, if you knew what you know now and you're going back to speak to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give him?
I think, looking back now, I wouldn't change anything from my journey, because obviously everything is all learning, and I wouldn't be here without those experiences. I would love to start nutrition, learning about nutrition earlier though, i.e. doing like a qualification, something more science-based, physics, biochemistry, and be qualified earlier. But that's the only thing really.
Very cool. And so for someone watching who wants to keep up to date with what you're doing, where's the best place for them to follow you, get in touch?
So the best and most updated place would be my Instagram page. That's instagram.com, livevitae, LIVEVITAE. There's also a website, livevitae.com. And I'm trying to push out some more blog posts, but time is the major factor in that.
As it always is.
Yeah.
Ryan, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, mate.
Really appreciate it.